On a quiet afternoon, a ruthless billionaire accepts a child's crayon drawing, then sees his own face staring back at him. One innocent sentence cracks open a buried past, a dead man's name, and a waiting little girl. As secrets surface and promises are tested, he must choose return to power or stay and become family before time runs out forever. Graham Vale parked his sedan on a narrow Lawrenceville street, where winter clung to the brick like old guilt. A modest sign hung above the door. Harbor Light Community Center letters faded, hopeful, stubborn. He checked his watch, then checked it again as if time could protect him. 15 minutes, he muttered. Sign, smile, leave. The donation was marketing's idea, not his. A clean headline, a warm photo. Proof the billionaire had a heart. Graham translated the pitch into the language he trusted: optics, leverage, control. He adjusted his tie, an automatic reflex from boardrooms and courtrooms, and stepped inside. Warm air rushed him, carrying the sharp bite of paint, clay disinfectant, and something sweet cinnamon, maybe. Children's laughter ricocheted down the hallway, loud enough to feel like a hand pressed to his chest. The walls were lined with crooked drawings, suns with too many rays, families with too many smiles. A woman with gray hair and soft eyes approached, hands clasped like she'd been waiting for a miracle. "Mr. Vale," she said, "I'm Hattie Brooks' coordinator here. Your gift is going to change our daycare." Graham offered the smile he used at galas, polished, practiced, empty. "Happy to help." Hattie's gaze flicked past him down the hall. "Would you like to meet the children before we sign? They're excited." His instinct rose fast. Number complications, noise, sticky hands. He didn't do children, he did contracts. He started. "It's only a few minutes," Hattie said, gentle but firm. It would mean the world to them. Something in her eyes stopped his refusal mid-syllable. Not pity, not manipulation. Just a quiet certainty that some people mattered more than schedules. Graham exhaled. Fine. A few minutes. He followed her down the hallway, unaware he'd just walked toward the first crack in the life he'd built like armor. The activity room was chaos in its purest form: blocks, clacking paper, tearing tiny shoes, squeaking on linoleum. Hattie introduced him like a hero. "Kids, this is Mr. Vale. He's helping us get new books and toys." 20 faces turned. Graham swallowed. Numbers didn't stare back. Contracts didn't judge. But children looked like they could see the hollowness behind his suit. A small girl stepped out from the crowd and walked straight toward him. Blonde hair in 2 uneven braids, a faint marker smudge on her cheek, bright, attentive eyes. She carried a sheet of paper with both hands like it mattered. She stopped in front of him and studied his face, serious as a judge. "My name is Maisie Cade," she announced. "I'm 5.5. Graham forced a nod. "Hi, Maisie. I made a drawing." She held it out. His hands accepted before his brain caught up. The drawing was simple and loud with color: a house, a sun, a woman with long hair, a little girl holding hands with a tall man. Graham gave the automatic charity event response. "It's very nice." He tried to hand it back. Maisie shook her head. "No, it's for you." "For me," he echoed, thrown. She pointed at the tall man, then looked up, voice softening. "You remind me of my daddy." The words landed like a dropped glass, small sound, sharp impact. Hattie stepped forward. "Sweetheart, don't bother Mr. Vale, it's no bother," Graham heard himself say, distant. Maisie touched her chest. "He's in heaven, but I feel him here." Graham's throat tightened. He couldn't look away from her face, the dimples, the eyes. Familiar, impossible. His pulse stumbled, then started running again, and for the first time in years, Graham felt something he couldn't buy or control, an ache that demanded answers. Maisie didn't wait for permission. She took Graham's hand, small fingers grip, and tugged him toward a table scattered with crayons. "Come," she said. "I have treasures." Before he understood how it happened, He was wedged into a kindergarten chair, knees angled awkwardly. Maisie lined up 6 rocks like priceless artifacts. "This one is magic," she whispered, placing a gray stone in his palm. "When you hold it and make a wish, it comes true. But only if you really believe." "What kind of wishes do you make?" he asked. Her smile dimmed. "I wished for my daddy to come back." She swallowed, then tried to sound casual. "Maybe I didn't believe hard enough." Something tightened behind Graham's ribs. He nodded uselessly because no spreadsheet had ever taught him what to say to a child who missed someone forever. "This one is sand," she rushed on, offering another rock. "I found it on my birthday. Mommy said it was a present from Daddy." Minutes slipped. Graham forgot the donation papers, the meetings, the glowing phone in his pocket. He listened to princesses who rescued princes, to dragons under beds, to secrets only kids could make sound real. When Hattie finally guided him back to the lobby, the documents were signed in a blur. "Maisie is special," she said. "It's been hard since her father died. Her mom works 2 jobs. They barely see each other." In his car, Graham unfolded the drawing again. The tall man's smile stared up at him like a dare. "You remind me of my daddy. Kids said strange things all the time, right? So why did it feel like a key turning inside a locked door?" He started the engine, drove toward glass towers and profit, and realized clear he would be back tomorrow, absolutely. That night, Graham Vale did not sleep. His penthouse sat high above Pittsburgh, wrapped in glass and silence. No traffic noise, no neighbors, just the low hum of appliances and the soft glow of the city below, like a world he observed but never touched. He stood by the window, jacket still on, tie loosened but not removed, holding a child's drawing in both hands. A house, a son, a little girl, a tall man smiling. "You remind me of my daddy." He folded the paper once, then unfolded it, smoothed the creases with his thumb as if it mattered. Kids say things, he told himself. They imagine connections. Faces blur, words slip. But the ache in his chest refused logic. Graham moved through the apartment, noticing things he had never noticed before. A dining table that had never hosted a meal. A couch that smelled new after years. Walls bare of photographs, no birthdays, no holidays, no proof of life. He opened his fridge. Pre-made meals, expensive wine. Nothing that required staying. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel like success. It felt like abandonment, self-inflicted. He lay on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. Maisie's voice replaying with brutal clarity. "He's in heaven. But I feel him here." Who was here? Why did her eyes feel familiar? Why had her words cut through him when nothing else ever had? At 3:17 a.m., Graham did something unthinkable. He reached for his phone, canceled 2 meetings, then a third. His assistant would panic. Investors would question it. His schedule, sacred, unbreakable, collapsed with 3 taps. He didn't care. By dawn, the decision was carved into him. He would go back. Not for the donation, not for optics, not for closure, but because something inside him, something old and silent, had finally started knocking. And Graham Vale knew one thing with frightening certainty. If he ignored it, this would be the night that haunted him for the rest of his life. The next morning, Graham drove with the windows down despite the cold. The city looked different, less sharp, less distant. Or maybe it was just him. Harbor Light Community Center stood exactly as before. Same brick, same faded sign. But when he stepped inside, it felt like entering a room he had left unfinished. Hattie looked up, surprised. "Mr. Vale, we weren't expecting. I wanted to check on the kids," he said quickly, almost defensively. "See how they're using the new materials?" She smiled like she understood more than she said. "They're on the playground. Snack time." The playground buzzed with movement, children laughing, climbing, spilling crumbs. Then a voice cut through everything. Mr. Graham Maisie ran toward him, braids bouncing, smile too big for such a small face. She stopped short, suddenly unsure, hands clenched at her sides. "You came back," she said softer now. "I did," Graham replied, and he realized too late that he was smiling. Not the practiced version, the real one. Maisie took his hand without hesitation and pulled him toward a picnic table. "I have cookies," she whispered like it was contraband. Her unicorn lunchbox opened to reveal 4 broken chocolate chip cookies, homemade and imperfect. "My mom made them," Maisie said proudly. "She makes the best cookies in the world. Daddy said she could get rich selling them." The mention of her father dimmed her eyes for half a second. Graham noticed. "What was your dad like?" he asked gently. Maisie brightened, eager. "Funny. He told jokes. He used to say his pants shrank when he ate too many cookies." Graham laughed, quiet, surprised. "He worked a lot," Maisie continued, "but he always came home. Now Mommy works a lot, office in the day, restaurant at night." She lowered her voice. "Sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm asleep." Something twisted inside Graham, sharp, protective, unfamiliar. "I'm sorry," he said. Maisie shrugged, trying to be brave. "Daddy says laughing helps everything." She giggled, then looked at him closely. "When you left yesterday," she said, "I thought maybe you wouldn't come back." Graham's chest tightened. "I said I would," he replied. Maisie nodded, satisfied. That trust, simple, total, hit harder than any accusation ever could. Snack time ended, but Maisie didn't move. She sat beside Graham, legs swinging, eyes searching his face like she was memorizing it. "Do you have kids, Mr. Graham?" she asked suddenly. The question struck without warning. "No," he said. "Why not?" He hesitated. Because the truth had never been shaped into words. "I was busy," he answered carefully. "Working." Maisie frowned, thinking hard. "Daddy said family is better than chocolate." Graham smiled despite himself. "Your dad sounds very wise." "He was," she said firmly. "He fixed everything." She paused, then leaned closer. "Do you want to see his picture?" Graham's pulse jumped. "Yes," he said too quickly. Then softer. "I would." Maisie shook her head. "Not here. It's at home." Disappointment flickered through him, irrational, immediate. "I can bring it tomorrow," she added. "If you come back." The air shifted. "Will you?" she asked. Graham felt the weight of it, the way her small world balanced on adult words. "If you want me to," he said. Her face lit up. "I do." "Then I'll be back," he replied. Maisie's eyes locked onto his, serious now. "Promise?" Graham nodded slowly. "I promise." She studied him for a long moment, then smiled, relieved, certain. "Okay," she said. "I'll put it in my backpack. I have to be very careful. It's my treasure. I'll treat it like treasure too," Graham said. Maisie nodded. "It is." As Graham left Harbor Light again, the building felt different. Smaller, warmer, more dangerous. Because now this wasn't curiosity. It was commitment. And on the drive back to the city, Graham realized something that made his hands tighten on the wheel. For the first time in his life, someone was waiting for him to return. Graham arrived earlier than he meant to. He sat in the car across from Harbor Light Community Center, engine off, hands still on the wheel. The building hadn't changed. He had. Inside, Hattie met him with a knowing smile. "She's been waiting," she said quietly, backpack and all. Maisie sat on a small chair near the window, legs swinging too fast for calm. When she saw him, her whole body straightened. "You came," she said, relief rushing into her voice. "I promised," Graham replied. She slid off the chair and opened her backpack with exaggerated care, as if ceremony mattered. "These are my treasures," she announced. First came drawings, folded, creased, loved. Princesses with swords, dragons with crooked wings, stick figures holding hands. Then a small gray stone. Daddy's lucky rock. A plastic dinosaur missing its tail. His favorite. Each object landed on the table like a fragment of a life Graham had never lived but somehow felt. Finally, Maisie reached deeper, slower now. She pulled out a photograph. Her hands paused. She studied Graham's face, searching not for approval but safety. "This is my favorite one," she said softly. "My birthday, before Daddy went to heaven." Graham accepted the photo with both hands. Time stopped. A family stood frozen in the image cake, balloons, paper hats. Maisie beamed in the center. Her mother smiled, tired but happy. And beside them, Graham's breath left his body. The man in the photograph was him. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. Same jawline, same nose, same eyes. Even the slight tilt of the head, as if leaning into laughter. The room tilted. His vision narrowed. "See," Maisie said proudly. "I told you he looked just like you." Graham's fingers trembled against the edge of the photo. "Maisie." His voice barely held. "Your daddy, what was his full name?" She hugged the picture to her chest. "Evan Carter," she said. "Mommy says he was the best dad in the world." The name echoed inside Graham, hollow but heavy. "And did he have brothers?" Graham asked too carefully. Maisie shook her head. "Just Grandma." Graham stared at the photograph again, heart pounding. A mirror from a life he never knew. A man with his face, who had lived, loved, and died. And a child who trusted him with the proof. Graham left Harbor Light in a daze. He remembered walking out, remembered nodding at Hattie. But once inside the car, everything blurred. He drove. No destination, no music, just asphalt and white lines slicing forward. His phone buzzed his assistant. He ignored it. The photograph sat on the passenger seat, face up. He couldn't look at it. Then he did. Every red light became an interrogation. Every reflection in the windshield brought the same face back at him. That's impossible, he told himself. Coincidences exist. But not like this. 3 hours later, Graham stood in front of the house where he'd grown up. Same lawn, same windows, same quiet perfection. His adoptive mother opened the door with surprise that turned to concern. "Graham, why didn't you call?" They sat in the living room where every achievement of his life hung framed on the walls. Diplomas, awards, headlines, proof he existed. Graham placed the photograph on the coffee table. Silence fell. His adoptive father leaned forward. His mother's hand flew to her mouth. "My God," she whispered. "He looks exactly like you." Graham's voice was steady, but only because everything inside him had gone rigid. "I need to know about my adoption." His parents exchanged a look, old, heavy, practiced. "Why now?" his father asked quietly. Graham tapped the photo. "Because I found his daughter." The words hung there. His mother sat back slowly. "We always wondered," she said, "if there was another child." "Was I a twin?" Graham asked. No one answered immediately. Finally, his mother stood and retrieved an old shoebox from a closet. She placed it in his hands like it could explode. Inside, tiny socks, a hospital bracelet, an intake form. No letter, no names, just a date. And the words, "newborn," left at the door. Graham closed the box. "So there could have been someone else," he said. His father nodded once. "It's possible. Possible." That word shattered everything. Graham didn't sleep that night either. The shoebox sat open on his kitchen counter like an accusation. He stared at the hospital bracelet, small enough to fit around one finger. Someone else. A twin, a brother, a man with his face, who became a father. At dawn, Graham drove to the state archives. The building was gray utilitarian, designed for truth without comfort. He waited hours while a clerk retrieved dusty files. His adoption record was thin, final, legal, no mother's name, no siblings listed. "Can we check around the same date?" Graham asked. "Other infants." The clerk sighed sympathetically. Abandoned babies were sometimes registered separately. Without a biological name, it's almost impossible. Almost. That word burned. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky bruised orange. Graham stood in the parking lot, phone in hand, and made a call he never thought he'd make. "Find everything you can on Evan Carter," he told his assistant. "Employment records, addresses, family, and his mother. I need her name." A pause. "Is this for business?" No, Graham said. "It's personal, very personal." He hung up and leaned against his car, breath unsteady. 35 years of his life had been built on absence, but now there was a face, a name, a child with bright eyes and a backpack full of trust. And for the first time, Graham understood something terrifying. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about responsibility, because somewhere, a little girl believed he was connected to her father. And Graham Vale was no longer sure he could walk away from that, even if he wanted to. The address came in at 6:12 p.m. A modest duplex on the outskirts of the city. Not far, not hidden, close enough to hurt. Graham Vale parked across the street and didn't get out right away. The house looked tired, paint peeling at the edges, a porch light that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay awake. The small front garden was overgrown flowers bending toward the ground, as if they'd forgotten why they once reached for the sun. This was not the kind of place secrets were meant to survive. Graham stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked under his weight, a warning sound that felt personal. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. If this door opens, there is no going back. He knocked anyway. Footsteps answered. Slow. Careful. The sound of someone who lived alone long enough to distrust noise. The door opened a fraction. A woman stood there, early 60s, gray hair pulled into a loose knot cardigan faded by too many washes. Her eyes sharp despite the wear met Graham's. The color drained from her face. She staggered back like she'd seen a ghost. "My God," she whispered, fingers clutching the doorframe. "You." Her knees buckled. Graham moved without thinking, catching her before she fell. "I'm Graham," he said softly, steadying her. "Graham Vale." She stared at him, breathing, uneven eyes tracing his face with disbelief and terror and something like recognition carved into bone. "You're the other one," she said, voice breaking. I never thought I'd see you." Inside the house smelled of dust and old coffee. Curtains were drawn tight, shutting the world out. Piles of unopened mail sat on the table like accusations. Photographs lined every wall, every surface. All of them were the same man. The man from the picture. The man with Graham's face, Evan. She guided Graham to the couch, hands trembling. "Sit," she said, then forgot she'd said it, and said it again. "I'm Marilyn Carter," she managed. "Evan was my son." Was. The word echoed. "I met your granddaughter," Graham said quietly. "Maisie." At the name, Marilyn broke. She covered her face and sobbed, shoulders shaking with a grief that had never learned how to leave. "How is she?" she asked through tears. "She's brave," Graham said. "She misses him." Marilyn nodded like she'd known that already. "I couldn't go see her anymore. Every time I did, it was like losing him again." Graham let the silence breathe. Then he asked the question he'd been carrying like a loaded weapon. "Why was I given up?" Marilyn closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were old, older than her years. "I was 19, she said. "I had no money, no family. Their father disappeared when I told him I was pregnant." She stood and retrieved an old shoebox from a cabinet, hands shaking so badly Graham stood to help. Inside were 2 tiny hospital bracelets. 2 names: Evan Carter, baby boy B, and a blurred photograph of 2 newborns in incubators, wires, and tubes swallowing their bodies. Graham's breath caught. "That's us," he whispered. Marilyn nodded. "You were both premature, so small, so fragile. She pointed to one side of the photo. You were weaker, needed more care. Her voice cracked. I slept on hospital floors. I didn't have food some nights. And I had 2 babies. Tears streamed down her face. A nurse told me about adoption, she continued. Said there were families waiting. Families who could give one of you what I couldn't. Graham didn't interrupt. I fought it, Marilyn said, for weeks. I asked myself how a mother chooses. She looked at him directly. Life chose for me. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the photo. Evan got stronger first, gained weight, cried louder. You stayed fragile. The room felt too small. I kept the one who could survive with nothing, Marilyn whispered, and I gave the other a chance to live. She collapsed into sobs covering her mouth. I left you at the orphanage wrapped in the only good blanket I had. I wrote a letter. Your name, your birthday. She shook her head, devastated. Then I took it out. I thought a clean start would be kinder. Graham knelt in front of her, heart pounding not with anger, but with a strange, aching clarity. You saved us both, he said. Marilyn looked up, stunned. You're not angry, Graham swallowed hard. I always felt something was missing, he said. Now I know what. His gaze drifted to the photos of Evan everywhere, smiling, alive, loved. I lost a brother I never met, Graham said quietly. But he left me a niece. Marilyn reached out and touched Graham's face with trembling fingers, like she needed proof he was real. I thought about you every day, she whispered. And for the first time in his life, Graham Vale felt the past stop bleeding and start telling the truth. The silence after Marilyn's confession was heavier than any scream. Graham remained kneeling in front of her, the shoebox open between them, like an exposed wound. The photograph of the 2 infants lay on top, tiny bodies swallowed by wires and glass, separated before they ever knew how to hold on. Marilyn wiped her face with trembling hands. I never stopped wondering, she whispered. Every birthday, every Christmas, I imagined what you might look like. If you were safe, if you were loved. Graham swallowed. His chest felt tight, but not with anger. With grief, with understanding. I was, he said quietly. They loved me. They did their best. Marilyn nodded, relief breaking through her tears. That's all I ever wanted. She tried to stand, but her legs faltered. Graham rose instantly, steadying her. You should sit, he said. I'm fine, Marilyn insisted, then frowned, confused. I think I already sat. The words landed wrong. Graham stilled. Marilyn noticed his expression and forced a smile. I've been a bit forgetful lately, she said lightly, too lightly. Names, appointments. She waved a dismissive hand, but Graham's eyes drifted to the kitchen table. Unopened envelopes, medical bills, prescription bottles, some full, some empty, some expired. A calendar hung crooked on the wall. Several dates were circled, then crossed out. Marilyn Graham said carefully, Are you seeing a doctor? She hesitated. When I can, she admitted. The clinic is expensive, and sometimes I forget the appointments. A quiet confession, heavy with shame. Graham felt the ground shift beneath him. What did the doctor say, he asked. Marilyn lowered herself into a chair, suddenly older. They're not sure yet. Early signs. Memory lapses. Confusion. She laughed softly, a sound without humor. They mentioned Alzheimer's. The word echoed like a gunshot. Graham's world narrowed to the woman in front of him, his mother who had survived poverty loss, and an impossible choice only to face forgetting alone. How long have you known, he asked. Almost a year, Marilyn said. Around the time Evan died. Evan. His brother had died, and his mother had started disappearing inside herself at the same time. The cruelty of the timing made Graham's jaw tighten. Why didn't you tell anyone, he asked. Marilyn looked down. Who would I tell? I didn't want to burden Evan. And after She gestured vaguely. After there was no one left. The sentence struck harder than anything else. No one left. Graham stood abruptly pacing the small living room. The photographs watched him, Evan smiling from every angle, frozen in moments Marilyn clung to because memory was already betraying her. "You shouldn't be here alone," Graham said, stopping in front of her. Marilyn looked up, startled. "I've managed?" "Barely," he said, not unkindly. "You're missing appointments. You're skipping treatment." She stiffened. "I don't need charity." "This isn't charity," Graham said, voice low, controlled. "This is family." The word seemed to knock the breath from her lungs. "I gave you up," Marilyn whispered. "I don't get to ask anything from you." Graham crouched in front of her again, meeting her eyes, his eyes. "You didn't give me up," he said. "You gave me a chance." Tears spilled freely now. "I don't deserve this." "No," Graham replied firmly. "You deserve care. You deserve not to be alone." He inhaled, steadying himself, then said the words that had been forming since he saw the pills on the table. "You're coming with me." Marilyn stared at him, disoriented. "What, you'll live with me?" Graham continued. "I'll make sure you get the best doctors. A routine. Help." She shook her head, panicking. "I can't. I don't want to be a burden. You barely know me." "You're my mother," Graham said simply. The sentence felt unreal, heavy, true. "And I have more than enough to take care of you," he added. "You shouldn't be facing this by yourself." Marilyn covered her mouth, sobbing openly now. "I never thought, after everything, that I'd be forgiven." "This isn't forgiveness," Graham said softly. "This is connection." She looked at him through tears. "Do you really want this?" Graham didn't hesitate. "I want it more than anything I've ever built." Marilyn reached for his hand, clinging like the ground was giving way beneath her. "There's something else," she said quietly, as if afraid the truth might vanish if spoken too loudly. "I have a granddaughter." Graham's chest tightened. "Maisie," he said. "She knows." Marilyn's breath hitched. She said, "You looked like Evan." She was right. Marilyn laughed weakly through tears. He would have loved that. He always said family finds a way back. Graham helped her to her feet, wrapping an arm around her fragile shoulders. "We'll go see her," he said. "But not today. One step at a time." Marilyn nodded, exhausted but lighter, like a woman who had carried the world alone and was finally allowed to set it down. As Graham guided her toward the bedroom to rest, he looked once more at the shoebox on the table. 2 bracelets, 2 sons, one impossible choice, and a future that for the first time felt whole enough to hold the truth. Graham did not tell Maisie the truth right away. That night he moved Marilyn into his apartment quietly, carefully, as if noise might shatter what little stability she had left. The penthouse transformed almost instantly. Curtains were opened. Lamps were turned on. A kettle whistled on the stove for the first time in years. Marilyn sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug, staring at the city lights. "So high," she murmured. Evan would have laughed. He was afraid of heights. Graham swallowed. "I'll be here," he said. "We'll make a routine." She nodded, tired but calmer, like a woman allowed to rest at last. The next morning, Graham drove back to Harborlight Community Center alone. Maisie was already there. She sat by the window with her backpack on her lap, fingers gripping the straps like anchors. When she saw Graham, she stood so fast her chair tipped backward. "You came," she exclaimed, relief flooding her face. "I promised," Graham said. She searched his face immediately. "Did you see my daddy's picture again?" "Yes," Graham answered, honestly. Maisie smiled, then hesitated. "Did it make you sad?" "It made me understand something," he said. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. They sat at the small table where crayons were scattered like fallen confetti. Maisie colored carefully, tongue tucked between her teeth in concentration. "You were gone a long time," she said quietly. I had to talk to someone important, Graham replied. Your mom, she guessed. The word landed with gentle force. Yes, Graham said. My mom. Maisie looked up, eyes wide. You have a mommy, I do, he said, and she's very brave. Maisie thought about that. My mommy is brave too. She colored a bright yellow sun, pressing hard enough to bend the paper. When Daddy went to heaven, Maisie continued, voice small but steady. Mommy cried every night. She thought I was sleeping. I wasn't. Graham's chest tightened. I waited, Maisie said. I waited for Daddy to come back. Then I waited for Mommy to stop crying. She paused, then looked at Graham. Then you came. The words were not an accusation, not a demand, just a fact. Graham leaned forward. Maisie, he said gently, I need you to understand something. She listened with total focus. I'm not your daddy, he said. No one can replace him. Maisie nodded immediately. I know, she said. Daddy is in heaven. Relief loosened something inside Graham, but he continued. I can be someone who stays, someone who comes back, someone who doesn't disappear. Maisie studied his face with the seriousness of a child weighing truth. Like a promise, she asked. Yes, Graham said. Like a promise. She smiled slowly. Okay. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a drawing. 5 figures this time, but one was faint, unfinished. That one's you, she explained, pointing. I didn't color it yet. I wanted to make sure. Graham felt his throat tighten. I'll color it with you, he said. And in that quiet moment, crayons moving, sunlight spilling across the table, Graham understood something terrifying and beautiful. Waiting had ended. Now came staying. Elena did not trust Graham Vale. She had learned not to. Men came and went. Promises were loud at first, then quietly forgotten. And this man, successful, controlled, immaculate, looked like trouble wrapped in good intentions. She stood in the doorway of her apartment as Graham approached with Marilyn beside him. The resemblance struck her like a blow. Her breath caught. My God, Elena whispered. You look exactly like Evan. Marilyn's eyes filled with tears. I see him every time I look at you, she said softly. Elena's posture hardened immediately, protective, instinctive. She stepped slightly in front of Maisie without realizing it. This is my grandmother, Maisie announced, proudly breaking the tension. Daddy's mommy. Marilyn knelt, hands trembling. Hello, my sweet girl. Maisie studied her for a second, then smiled and wrapped her arms around Marilyn's neck. I missed you, Maisie said simply. Marilyn broke down. Elena watched, conflicted relief warring with fear. Inside, the apartment felt smaller with so many emotions packed inside it. Marilyn sat quietly, overwhelmed but radiant. Maisie talked nonstop, filling the space with stories. Elena finally turned to Graham. You should know, she said firmly, Maisie gets attached easily. She's already lost too much. I understand, Graham replied. That's why I won't lie to her. And what exactly are you planning to be? Elena asked. A benefactor? A replacement? No, Graham said. A presence. Elena crossed her arms. Those disappear too. Graham held her gaze. Not this one. Silence stretched between them. Elena exhaled slowly. I work 2 jobs, she said. I don't ask for help. I can't afford disappointment. I'm not here to save you, Graham said quietly. I'm here to support what already exists. Maisie interrupted, holding up a drawing. Look, it's all of us 5 figures stood beneath a bright sun. Evan in the sky. Marilyn holding Maisie's hand. Elena beside them. And Graham not replacing, not towering, standing slightly behind, hand resting gently on Maisie's shoulder. Elena's eyes filled despite herself. Marilyn touched her arm. You raised her beautifully. Elena swallowed hard. That night after Graham left, Elena tucked Maisie into bed. Do you like Uncle Graham? She asked carefully. Maisie yawned. He stays. That was all. And for Elena, it was enough for now. Graham did not announce his presence. That was the first thing Elena noticed. He didn't arrive with gifts that made noise, didn't bring solutions wrapped in speeches. He simply showed up and stayed long enough to matter. One afternoon, the sink in Elena's apartment began to leak again. She knelt on the kitchen floor, wrench in hand jaw, clenched water pooling beneath her knees. Maisie hovered nearby, holding paper towels like bandages. "I've got it," Elena muttered. Graham appeared in the doorway, jacket already off. "Can I try?" he asked. Elena hesitated. Pride flared. Then fatigue won. "5 minutes," she said. "Then I call the landlord again." Graham knelt beside her, sleeves rolled up, movements practiced but unassuming. He didn't explain, didn't boast, just worked. The leak stopped. Maisie gasped like she'd witnessed magic. "You fixed it like Daddy," she said without thinking. The air froze. Graham stilled, then continued tightening the valve. "He taught me," Graham replied evenly. "A long time ago." It was a lie and a truth at the same time. That night, Graham stayed for dinner. Elena cooked pasta from whatever was left in the fridge. The sauce was thin. The table wobbled. Graham ate like it was a 5-star meal. Maisie chattered nonstop, showing him her drawings, her school worksheets, her dinosaur collection. After dinner, Graham washed dishes without being asked. Elena watched from the doorway, arms crossed, unsettled by how natural it all looked. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I know," Graham replied. "I want to." That answer frightened her more than obligation ever could. Over the weeks, Graham's presence threaded itself into their days. He picked Maisie up when Elena worked late, sat through bedtime stories voicing dragons and princesses with embarrassing sincerity, fixed a broken chair, replaced a flickering light bulb. He never took Evan's chair. At night, when Maisie fell asleep mid-story, Graham stayed a few minutes longer, just watching her breathe. Elena noticed. "You don't look away," she said one evening. "I spent most of my life looking past things," Graham replied. "I'm trying to learn." Slowly, imperceptibly, Graham stepped into the empty space Evan had left, not to fill it, but to support its edges. And the house, once stretched thin by absence, began to hold. Elena had learned to survive alone. Depending on someone felt like standing on ice that might crack without warning. One night after Maisie fell asleep, Elena sat across from Graham at the small kitchen table. "You can't do this forever," she said abruptly. Graham looked up. "Do what be here," she said. "Be reliable. Be permanent." The word tasted dangerous. Graham didn't answer right away. Elena pressed on. "I've seen people promise stability before. They mean it until they don't. I'm not making promises I can't keep," Graham said. "That's the problem," Elena snapped. "You don't know what you can keep." Silence stretched. Elena stood pacing. Maisie already lost her father. "I won't let her lose another man who mattered." Graham absorbed the words without defensiveness. "You're right," he said finally. "I don't know everything that will happen." He stood, voice steady but raw. "But I know this leaving would be easier. Staying costs more. And I'm choosing the harder thing." Elena's eyes burned. "You have everything," she said. "Money, control. You could walk away without consequences." Graham shook his head. "I already tried that life." He gestured around the apartment. This mess, this noise, this waiting, that's the first thing that ever scared me enough to feel real." Elena's breath caught. "What happens when you get tired?" she asked. "When it's inconvenient, I stay, anyway," Graham said. The certainty in his voice broke something open. Elena sank into a chair, covering her face. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I don't want to need anyone." Graham knelt beside her. "You don't have to need me," he said gently. "Just don't push me away because you're afraid." Elena cried then, not loudly but deeply. and for the first time since Evan's death, she let someone else witness her exhaustion. Maisie's school play was on a Friday afternoon. Elena had almost skipped it. Work was busy, bills were tight, and sitting in that auditorium meant facing the empty seat Evan used to fill. Graham arrived early holding 3 tickets. I didn't want to assume, he said. Elena stared at the extra one. You don't have to sit there, she said quietly. I know, Graham replied, but I want to. The auditorium filled with parents and noise. Children fidgeted backstage. Maisie peeked through the curtain and spotted them. Her smile lit up the room. When the lights dimmed, Elena's hands trembled. The empty seat beside her felt louder than applause. Graham didn't reach for her hand. He simply sat, present, respectful, grounded. Maisie stepped onto the stage, costume, crooked voice shaking at first. Then she found Graham in the audience, and she steadied. She sang louder, smiled brighter. Elena felt tears spill freely. At the final bow, Maisie scanned the crowd again, then waved. Not just at her mother, at both of them. Afterward, Maisie ran into Graham's arms without thinking. Did you see me? She asked breathlessly. I saw everything, Graham replied. Elena watched the scene the way Graham stepped back just enough, letting Maisie choose the closeness. In that moment, Elena understood something essential. Graham was not trying to replace Evan. He was honoring him by staying. And for the first time, the empty seat didn't feel like loss. It felt like room. The decision did not arrive with drama. No raised voices, no late-night speeches, no cinematic thunder. It came on a Tuesday morning between emails. Graham sat alone in his office, the glass walls reflecting a man he barely recognized anymore. The city sprawled beneath him, efficient and indifferent. His assistant had left a neat stack of documents on his desk, expansion plans, overseas travel schedules, numbers that once thrilled him. He read none of it. Instead, his eyes lingered on a photo taped discreetly inside a folder. Maisie on stage, arms stretched wide, smile fearless. He closed his laptop. At noon, he walked into the boardroom where 12 executives waited, polished and expectant. I'll be stepping back from day-to-day operations, Graham said calmly. Silence followed, sharp, stunned. You're joking, someone finally said. I'm not, Graham replied. Questions exploded. Numbers, risks, consequences. Graham listened patiently, then spoke with clarity that surprised even him. I built this company to control outcomes, he said. But the most important things in my life now can't be controlled. He didn't explain further. He didn't owe them his heart. That evening, Graham returned to Elena's apartment early. Marilyn was asleep on the couch, breathing shallow but steady. Maisie sat on the floor, coloring, humming to herself. Elena looked up. You're home early. Graham nodded. I made a decision. Her body tensed instinctively. About work, yes, Sarah. She waited, bracing. I'm staying, Graham said simply. Here, present, available. Elena searched his face for conditions, clauses, escape routes. People don't do that, she said quietly. I know, Graham replied. Maisie looked up. Does that mean you'll come to my school tomorrow too? Yes, Graham said without hesitation. She smiled, satisfied, and went back to coloring. Elena watched him in silence. Later that night, when the apartment was quiet, Elena spoke again. You don't owe us this, I know, Graham said. That's why it matters. He wasn't rescuing. He was choosing. And for the first time, Graham Vale didn't feel powerful. He felt aligned. The call came at 2:11 a.m. Graham was already awake when his phone vibrated. Elena, he answered instantly. Her voice was barely coherent. It's my mom, Marilyn, she collapsed. She's not responding. Graham was dressed and out the door in seconds. The hospital corridor smelled like antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped with mechanical indifference. Marilyn lay pale beneath harsh light's oxygen mask, fogging faintly with each breath. The doctor spoke quickly. Stress, dehydration, Early cognitive episodes exacerbated. Graham nodded, absorbing words that refused to soften. Elena stood frozen by the wall, arms wrapped around herself. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have noticed. I should have slowed down." Graham stepped in front of her. "Stop." She looked at him, eyes wild. "This isn't a punishment," he said firmly. "It's a moment." She broke, then sobbing into his chest, years of holding it together unraveling in seconds. "I can't do this alone anymore," she cried. Graham held her steady and unyielding. "You're not alone," he said. "Not tonight. Not again." Maisie sat in a chair nearby, feet dangling, clutching her stuffed dinosaur. She watched silently, too quiet. Graham crouched in front of her. "Hey, is Grandma going to heaven too?" she asked, voice trembling. "No," Graham said gently. "She's staying. She just needs help." Maisie nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll help too." At dawn, Marilyn stirred. Her eyes opened unfocused, then landed on Graham. "Oh," she murmured. "You came." "Yes," Graham said softly. "I'm here." Her gaze shifted to Elena, then to Maisie. "My family," she whispered. In that fragile moment, something fundamental shifted. This wasn't a crisis that would push them apart. It was a fracture that revealed what truly held. Recovery was slow, not dramatic, not linear. Marilyn needed supervision, medication schedules, routine. Elena took time off work for the first time in years. Graham rearranged everything. He learned how to cook breakfast, how to manage appointments, how to sit through silence without trying to fix it. One evening, the four of them sat around the table eating soup. No one spoke. Maisie suddenly looked up. "Can I say something?" she asked. Everyone turned to her. "Family," she said carefully, "is when people stay even when they're tired." The words landed like truth spoken without armor. Elena covered her mouth. Marilyn smiled through tears. Graham felt his chest ache in the best possible way. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly right." Later that night, Maisie taped a new drawing to the fridge. 4 figures under a sun. No one missing. No one floating away. Graham stood behind Elena, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder, not claiming, just present. "This feels real," Elena said quietly. "It is," Graham replied. Family was no longer an abstract concept. It was soup on the table, a child's certainty, a promise kept at 2 a.m. And for the first time, none of them were waiting anymore. They were living. Green Hill Cemetery was quiet in the way only places of truth could be. No traffic, no phones, no meetings waiting to interrupt a thought. Just rows of headstones, pale and patient, stretching beneath a sky that refused drama. Graham walked slowly, holding a small bouquet of yellow flowers, Evan's favorite, according to Elena. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes, each step measured, deliberate, as if he were approaching something that might disappear if rushed. It had taken him months to come here. Months to feel ready to speak to a man he had never met, but who had shaped his life more than anyone else. The headstone was simple. Evan Carter, beloved son, husband, father. Graham stopped in front of it. For a long moment, he said nothing. He took in the dates, the short dash between them, the absurdity of how much life fit into so little space. "Hi, Graham," finally said, voice low. "It's me." The wind moved through the trees, scattering light across the grass like passing thoughts. "I didn't know you existed," he continued. "And you didn't know about me." He let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Turns out we were never really alone. Just misplaced." Graham crouched, placing the flowers carefully at the base of the stone. "I met your daughter," he said. "She's incredible, brave, too perceptive for her age." He smiled faintly. "She has your eyes, and your terrible sense of humor." The smile faded. "I'm sorry I wasn't there," Graham said. "Not that I could have been. But still." The guilt rose, irrational, heavy. You built a life, he continued. You loved. You showed up. You were everything I didn't even know I was missing. Graham reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a pen. Sleek, heavy, gold. The pen that had signed billion-dollar contracts. The pen investors photographed. The pen that once symbolized success so sharp it cut away anything that slowed it down. I carried this everywhere, Graham said quietly. It was proof I mattered. He turned it slowly between his fingers, watching sunlight flash against the metal. But when I met Maisie, he continued, voice tightening, I realized something terrifying. He swallowed. I had built a life that left no room for anyone else. Graham knelt closer to the stone. She waits for me, he said. She believes me when I say I'll come back. His voice cracked, not loudly, but completely. I don't want to be the man who leaves. Graham placed the pen on the headstone. Carefully. Deliberately. I'm leaving this here, he said. This was my old life. Control, distance, safety. The wind picked up slightly, nudging the pen, but it stayed in place. I don't need it anymore. Graham rested his hand against the cold stone. I promise you this, he said, voice steady now. I will take care of them. All of them. He closed his eyes. I'll teach her to ride a bike. I'll be at every school play. I'll tell her stories about you, even the embarrassing ones. A pause. And I'll make sure she grows up knowing her father wasn't just loved. He was worthy. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was complete. Graham stood brushing dirt from his knees and looked once more at the name carved in stone. Thank you, he said simply, for staying long enough to leave something real behind. As he walked away, Graham didn't look back. He didn't need to. Some goodbyes weren't endings. They were permission. The refrigerator hummed softly. It was a small sound, ordinary, forgettable, but Graham noticed it now. He noticed everything. Maisie sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, coloring with careful intensity. Her crayons were arranged by color, a system she insisted on maintaining. Marilyn sat at the table, knitting slowly, counting stitches under her breath so she wouldn't lose her place. Elena moved between stove and sink, cooking without rushing for the first time in years. The apartment no longer felt borrowed. It felt lived in. Uncle Graham, Maisie said suddenly without looking up, "Don't move." He froze mid-step. Okay. She squinted at the page, tongue tucked in concentration. The paper was thicker than usual, the good kind she saved for important things. What are you making? Elena asked gently. Our family, Maisie replied like it was obvious. Graham's chest tightened. When Maisie finally held the drawing up, the room went quiet. 5 figures stood in front of a small house beneath a bright sun. Elena and Marilyn on either side. Maisie in the middle. Evan in the sky, not fading, not distant, watching with a soft smile. And Graham, not larger than the others, not replacing anyone. Just there. On his chest, Maisie had colored a large red heart layered over and over until the crayon wax shone. Why is mine so big? Graham asked, voice careful. Maisie shrugged. Because you stay. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. Marilyn's knitting slipped from her fingers. Graham knelt and accepted the drawing with both hands as if it might break. This is the most important thing I've ever been given, he said. Maisie smiled, satisfied. Can we put it on the fridge? They taped it up together. Crooked. Perfect. That night, after Maisie fell asleep, between them on the couch, head on Elena's shoulder, feet tucked against Graham's leg, the apartment settled into a rare kind of quiet. Elena spoke first. I used to think strength meant not needing anyone. Graham didn't interrupt. I was wrong, she continued. Strength is letting the right people stay. Graham nodded. I spent years thinking success meant control. He looked at the drawing on the fridge. Turns out it means presence. Marilyn watched them, eyes soft. Your brother would be proud, she said. Graham felt the truth of it not as approval, but as peace. Later, when the lights were off and the city blinked below the windows, Graham stood alone for a moment, looking at the family portrait glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing the next milestone. He wasn't proving anything. He was exactly where he belonged. And he stayed. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.